Yeah,
All right.
horrible.
That's plenty of claps. All right. Here we are.
We're
back.
here.
If you're watching right now, or if you're watching later, go to Spotify, or if you're one of those people with iPhones, you don't have the superior Android, go to Apple Podcast, whatever, and subscribe to the Lamplight Productions. Google, anywhere you can get podcasts. And subscribe to Lamplight Productions. You will find on there, hopefully by the time this is uploaded, a bonus episode with Nate that is only available on those places. You're not going to find it on YouTube. So if you're just one of those YouTube people, well, you're missing out.
And subscribe to the podcast so you get
about
updates.
how it changed your life. All right, here we are. Unnamed episode, because I've realized it's very smart to stop giving the numbers.
Really?
Unnumbered episode, because we get our technical difficulties. Barzilai is back with possibly consecutively.
Yes.
Who knows?
Possibly,
maybe not. We switch it up a little bit. And our guest, what's your nombre?
Everyone calls me Q.
Q.
Yes.
Q. That's all we're gonna give. We're gonna be like Star Trek. We're gonna be like Barzilai and Q. That's all we're gonna get. No one needs to know your last name. No one needs to know any of your names. I'll just be Q. We might change our mind when we upload it. All right. So we were talking about before we started here. We're talking about desensitization. Why do so many video games promote violence? Remember when I got pulled onto the...
Yeah, I remember that.
It was horrible. I couldn't do that because everybody's like 100 people there. You're supposed to do the stupid line.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not stupid, just this line. And everybody's looking at you, and then they're like, why isn't it taking you so long to do one line? And that just makes it harder for you to do.
Right.
Because I don't know what you're doing. Anyways, a little inside baseball there. We're talking about video games. We're talking about desensitization. And I think it's interesting, I'm already starting with that word, Israel. Interesting. From someone, who, we were talking, because you, not to go too deep into, I'll let you tell your own story, are someone who's seen people die at a very young age, seen people around people they cared about die, versus, a lot of people, in violent ways, versus a lot of people like, in our society today are, I don't want to say, we'll say fortunate enough not to have to experience that.
Right.
A lot of people also are not, but, the three of us here, have you guys seen anybody die?
No.
You seen somebody die?
No, I haven't.
But never seen someone violently die.
No.
That's the difference. I've seen, parents passed away, but one parent passed away. But outside of that, we don't experience all that in this part of the neck of the woods. And so we're missing that sort of perspective.
Yeah, well, like growing up, like I'm in my late 40s now, but back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of gang activities where I grew up at, and by the time I graduated high school from the 9th grade to the 12th grade, 9 people that I was, not best friends with, but 9 people that I hung around were murdered, and by the time I was a senior, it was so traumatic that I actually felt myself leaning more towards that, being a product of the environment and kind of, doing what I felt that I had to do to survive. But, I didn't lean to that though, but I could feel the pull just to survive. It just was dark, it just didn't feel like, there was a future. It was bad, I'm talking about stabbing, shootings, people getting run over by vehicles, just, that's just was common where I grew up at. So, when I see young people now, it's great to talk about those things to try to help people make better decisions, because you don't want to grow up in an environment like that. And I hear a lot of young guys talking and, when I'm at work, and they think that's kind of cool, to be tough and street and things like that. But, they're not old enough to realize the importance of, a family and having children and seeing grandchildren and things like that. So, a lot of these things can come with maturity, but, if they don't have people talking to them, then it's going to be hard for them to realize that it's a path that they really don't want to take. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. You were talking about the, video games and people, kind of being like, well, you see it there. So, and a lot of, young people do get that sort of idea. It's almost like that. It's almost, I hate to compare it, but it's like the old warrior. Where it's like, oh, he's just an old guy. right? So you get this idea where it's like, oh yeah, you're saying all these things, and it gets very easy, you know, to kind of turn things into buzzwords. When you're trying to tell somebody like, hey, you know, don't go over here, it's going to hurt you, and they're like, okay, whatever, and then they don't see any obvious danger or whatever. It's easy to just be like, well, you know, but, and then so we get to this point because then, you know, you think, well, you know, which we've talked about this, like when you're telling, and you know, when someone's telling their child, right? Like, you know, which is very often the case. Like, I don't want you to do these things that I did, right? And it's like, I'm telling them, like, listen, I've been in the world, I've experienced the world, and I'm telling you this is what's going to occur. Like, the people, this is how people are. Like, this is what life is like. This is the way of things. This is life. And always the first thought, and I know this, I almost want to say this, you know, only Sith speaks in absolutes, but I almost want to say this, this is just absolutely, but you know, there could be some exceptions, but in general, one of the very first thoughts is, yeah, but I'm different. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I know takes place in the mind is that a lot of times when you're told not to do something, you know, most people feels like, you know, something is being taken from them or held back from them, some experience that, you know, that they want to go and enjoy. And, you know, usually when people feel like something is being taken from them or they're being deprived of some experience or something like that, it just makes them want to go out and, you know, do it more, partake in it more. So it's just one of those things where, you know, it just takes, you know, a lot of people continuing to try to, you know, point things out and explain and actually effectively communicate with people to really try to show how they don't want to make certain choices, you know, just to say, do what I tell you to do, you know, it's not great enough, you know, and I know that's, you know, my generation, we were raised like that. Well, do what I tell you to do without much explanations, you know. I mean, we really need to take time to explain these things and why, you know, there's issues there. You know, we really need to lay out the pros and cons so that, you know, the person can actually make a choice based on the information. So, I mean, we fail as communicators a lot of times, and we need to learn how to really, you know, become better communicators.
That's one of those ideas of fairness. You know, if you think about that what you're saying there, where you're talking about feeling like they're being deprived of something, you know, because it would be, it's like, you know, there's a difference between fairness. There's a difference between equality and equity and these things. The idea of what fairness is, like, because if you have children, right, and there's like, oh, you know, it's not fair. Someone had more of a piece or whatever. But it's like, okay, you know, the fairness isn't necessarily equal measurements, right? So it's like if you go in and put in more work than me, you get more of a return. Right. And I'm just like, well, it's fair. We should split it 50-50. Well, you know, but I did more work than you. You did more work than me, whatever. But that is like children. You know, parents are strict with their children, right? And they tell the child they can't do this. And then they see other children doing that. And then it's that false idea of fairness, right? Of being depressed, where it's like, yeah, but he's doing it, like I should. And then it's suddenly, you know, I noticed this a long time ago with certain people, certain situations where I was trying to point it out. I was like, man, that's the issue. Like you're over here thinking you deserve something that you had no right to. And it's that thing of like, oh, well, you know, he's over there allowed to do whatever he wanted, and he got this, whatever, and he got all that, and grass is greener on the other side. Right, so he's like, he got this and he got that, and it's like, it's not fair, you know, that I had to live with these. It's like, you know, his parents let him stay up all night, and children will do that, bragging to the children. His parents let him stay up all night, and you're making me give me a bedtime, and all these little things to get this idea of like, well, you know, this idea of fairness, but it's not. Right? It's not. And so it's this sort of this confusion there. And that's where that comes from, where then you start getting like, that's where like a lot of issues, the very beginning between parents and their children is that, where they're like, you're taking something from you and not realizing you have never had a right to it, but you're taking something from me because somebody else has something and I should have the same thing. And you're my parent and you're the kind of the thing in the way. It's not the same as like, and that's if that's not addressed, that's how people grow into the world of being like, well, he makes more money than me. He should be forced to like give me some of that money, because you know it's not fair or whatever. These ideas of what fairness comes in, and that's why, you know, communication at the beginning to kind of be like, hey, listen, you know, you're not, you know, like the thing I made before, which to you, which is, you know, sometimes you just have to look at people and be like, you're not even qualified to run your own life. Yeah. And I was thinking about this week because I was hearing these was hearing some anecdotal evidence. I was hearing some stories about some people.
Before you keep going, can you make that point again?
You're not qualified to run your own life.
Right. You know, a lot of people aren't qualified to run their own life, and they think that they are.
Right.
You know, I mean, we all need guidance. We all need people that we can talk to help us think outside the box. Because when you're in a situation, it seems so like stressful or traumatic or whatever it could, you know, possibly could be, and you need someone, you know, with a fresh perspective to help you out. I don't think it matters who you are. You know, you need help. We all need help, right. You know, I mean, and so for a child, a very young mind, an unlearned, untrained mind to think that they have all of the answers, you know, like teenagers do. Teenagers have all of the answers. You know, it's really, you know, a sad place to be in. You know, you really need, you know, guidance. Everyone, if you think you're, you know, so smart that you don't need any help, you know, you're cutting yourself off from, you know, opportunities to grow, you know, to make new friendships or whatever, you know, new relationships.
If I can ask, who was there for you as a child or as a young person growing up that kept you from making crazy decisions? Because and I'm sure you made some crazy decisions, but who was there? I know you've talked before to us about your grandparents and stuff like that, who really helped kind of mold and shape your childhood in a way that allowed you to kind of have a way out. So
yeah, it was mainly my grandparents. You know, even when I was out doing things, you know, I always just had their words, you know, just hearing their voice in my mind, you know, saying certain things. And, you know, I knew I couldn't do certain things because it would like break their heart. So it kind of kept me, you know, kind of kept my moral compass, you know, pointing north, as it were.
Tell us more about that. What did your grandparents do for you?
Well, it was, you know, it was like they expected more from me. You know, they wanted me to hit the books, you know, they told me I could be whatever I wanted to be, an astronaut, a doctor, you know, NFL player, whatever I wanted to do. They just showed me that there was more possibilities, you know, than what's actually in front of me. You know, they told me I can just do whatever, you know, and then they were caring, you know, they, you know, encouraged me. And, you know, when I got out of pocket, you know, they were quick to correct me and discipline me as well. So, you know, they did, I would say, everything that they could possibly do to keep me from actually being like a maniac on the streets, you know, when I got older. And my grandfather, he died when I was 10, and my grandmother died right in 92. So I think I was just about to graduate. But, you know, even after they were gone, I still remember those teachings, you know. And it was just like, I just didn't want to be like everyone else who was going to jail or being murdered and things like that. So, you know, and then I had several teachers that also were very impactful as well, you know, their encouragement and, you know, pushing me to do better in school and things like that. But it was mostly my grandparents, you know, and not to leave my mom and my pops out or anything like that. But, you know, growing up, I spent most of my time with my grandparents. We lived with them, and both my parents worked third shift. So my grandparents did most of the molding. So, you know, those are a lot of the things that I carry to this day.
What is, what are some things or something that your grandparents said, maybe all the time, or something that just randomly stuck with you?
All right. So my grandmother, she would say something like, you know, just because a person being ugly, you don't need to be ugly like them. Okay. You know, that's how she would say it. You know, you don't need to be ugly, you know, meaning I don't have to display the same negative character as other people, you know, just treat people, you know, kindly and decently and let them do what they're going to do. You don't have to act like that. You know, be a better person than that, be a bigger man. You know, it was like the basic things that everyone hears, you know, for the most part, I would think. Excuse me. And so those things just meant a lot to me, you know. And then the way I saw my grandmother and my grandfather interact was just encouraging. So
they have a great relationship?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You know, and they got into, you know, their spats and things like that. But then, you know, you would see them make up and apologize. And I thought that was really huge. You know, it might be a disagreement, but it wasn't, you know, like domestic violence or anything like that, just disagreements. Awesome. And, you know, then they would see us and it's like, y'all know we just playing. You know, they'll try to cover up the disagreement just so that it wouldn't leave a negative impression on us. And as kids, we thought they were playing, but as we got older, we realized like, oh, you know, those were like serious arguments, but they didn't want to negatively influence us. So that meant a lot as well.
Why I think it's really great when parents are themselves in front of their kids. Now, obviously, there's some things you might not want to show your kids and things that you might want to keep private. But when parents are willing to, because life is real. Mm-hmm. Life is life. There has problems. Life has all kinds of things. So when they're willing to have those conflicts, those fights, those arguments, hopefully not brutal,
Right.
in front of their children, and then willing to make up, because it shows full circle, and it shows the kids when they grow up that there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be arguments, not always going to get along, but you forgive each other, you make up, you learn, and you solve the problem, because conflict is necessary in order to work out the problem, as long as you keep it from turning into a fight.
I would disagree.
Okay.
In a way. I think part of that kind of idea is true. Mm-hmm. But I think really, actually, I think you should avoid having arguments, disagreements in front of your children. Okay. I understand having conflicts. There's a difference in disagreeing, because I think that it should be, you should be able to be like, hey, offer something. But I think, one of the things that the world is kind of missing is that, there should be a united front. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think a person should, which is, I think, what is the positive thing taking out of that is that, because obviously sometimes it's difficult to avoid, and you can't just like stuff your children or grandchildren into a room. But the fact that they kind of played it off and kind of kept that sort of unified and kept it from being like, oh, they're just like, this open conflict. I think it's important. I think it's important for parents to have this sort of united front. I think it's, specifically when you start getting into, because with arguments, it's difficult to have like arguments and conflict. Well, let me clarify. Not have disrespect.
Let me clarify, because I don't mean fights. I don't mean nasty, because it sucks to grow up in a household where your parents are always fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about don't hide the element that there's disagreement and that it needs to be solved properly.
Right.
Because, or like, even if you like get mad at your kids and you might maybe say something in anger to them, a lot of parents won't apologize because they don't want to seem weak.
Right.
But if they do, it just goes to show life is real. I make mistakes. Sometimes I even get upset and I do things, but then I always come back and fix it.
I think the underlying point of what you're making there, which is the hypocrisy part, is very true.
Yeah.
I just think that I don't think there's really many people in the world equipped to do the disagreement part, because disagreeing is difficult to keep without having aspects of disrespect. And it's important when you come into, specifically when you're dealing with fatherhood, fathers and mothers or whatever, it's important for the children to understand that respect. The respect of the mother to the father, the mutual respect overall.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And so I think that if you're talking about, just conversation of like things that people aren't passionate about, where you're just like, oh, how are we going to deal with this problem? Mm-hmm. The part that I think definitely rings true is if there's
what I'm trying to say, they should see the children should see their parents solve problems together. That's a better way to say it then. What's your take on this?
I think I do agree with you in the aspect of truth, of showing the truth to your children. Now, the argument aspect, I don't really know if I can. I'm not going to really.
I think I might have said it a bit too brutally.
No, not that.
Okay, let's not say brutally. I do believe it's very important to sort of kind of suss that out, because yes, that is absolutely true. You should see your parents working together to solve problems. But I think there's a difference between solving problems and the sort of disagreements. And when you talk about those disagreements, I think it's really important, unless, I think it's really important to keep that from your children. If there's something that you like, specifically when it's like the father and the mother, and the mother disagrees with something the father says, it's important to sort of kind of uphold, specifically if he makes decisions. Yeah. There's an example of I saw from the Waltons, this old show, where I don't remember the story. There was like the kids had like a pet or something, and the dad had to sell it because the family needed the money. And so they were pointing out the way the clip was, like he came in. And he was like, listen, I'm sorry, this is what it is. And he was trying to like soften the blow. And the mom was there, and they were like, oh, whatever. And he's like, listen, this is the decision, no more. Right? I'm sorry. And then he left. And then they went to the mother to plead with her. And it was clear that she disagreed with the decision.
Right. And that's
but she said, your father's right. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to do. And I think but when you say disagreement, that's like, honestly, kind of the connotations that come up when you say that. And I think those kind of things definitely.
Yeah. And I think it's bad when you have, the father has one point of view and the mother has another point of view, and they play the kids against, the parents and stuff like that. That's where that's not what I'm talking about.
The thing is, kids are smart, and they can manipulate you very quickly.
Kids are incredibly smart, yeah.
And so if you're not careful,
kids usually go to the mom to try to win over the dad.
Yeah.
That's, I had two brothers who grew up, and that's what we used to do. If dad said no or something like that, we kind of go crying to mom and things like
she's
that.
A little soft.
Yeah, and then she'll go and try to, smooth things over with pops and things like that. But it didn't always work if he put his foot down. But then, that would create an argument with them. Now my mom and my dad, they not to, say anything bad, but they argued a lot, and they loved each other, no doubt, but it was like, she spoke her mind, he spoke his mind, so it was, it was interesting, but they, they still work together to raise us and try to, teach us the things that we needed to know to grow up. But, I got to see the different dynamics and various relationships, I have aunts and uncles, and that's how they interacted. And so some of the things that I took away from all of those situations is, one, I've never, to the best of my knowledge, corrected my wife or pointed something out to her in front of the children, and she hasn't done the same, done it to me either. Because we talked about those things long before we had children, because we knew, like you said earlier, is the respect. So I never wanted to do anything that would, cause the children to think that I disrespected their mom.
Absolutely.
To the point where they felt that they could even bring her down to their level and talk to her the same way. It's like, well, Dad do it, then why can't I? It's not fair. You could talk to her like that, and I can't. Because then we get back into that whole fair thing. This is a young mind that doesn't even understand.
Because there's no double standards.
Right. Yeah. And so when you're dealing with all of those different aspects of life and things like that, a lot of it, life is really on the job training, and you just, you're blessed if you have people that know enough that they can share things with you and are patient enough, to help guide you through some of these things. Because, I'm sure everyone here has done something goofy, Right. And you got to look to, like, you asked me who helped me, what thoughts were I having based on what my grandparents told me and things like that. Every one of you should have someone that, gave you some forms of guidance to keep you from, like I said, acting a maniac in the streets and doing goofy things like that, So, those are the people that we should, want to be like, take in some of those character traits and try to, add to it, and so that we can help other people. That's the only way we're going to do better as people, just take the best, things from others and try to pass it down.
So the more that I listen, the aspect of the parents' parental transparency, and then the aspect of fairness and equality, I think that's something where that parents need to work really hard in the transparency aspect, because it seems like now parents tell their kids, you can be whatever you want to be, and the kid, it doesn't register to him. It's like, you have to be able to make me whatever
Define
I want.
what you mean though by mental transparency.
The aspect
I said parental transparency.
The aspect of you having to go out of your way to achieve it. It's not, because many times, like I said, you can be whatever you want to be, just go and show up. People just think, oh, just go and show up and you get a participation trophy, right? And then you're in. No, Q, it seemed like your grandparents taught you can be whatever you want to be, but it also sounds like, and you're well acquainted with your community, you're a great part of your community. It seems like you knew in your mind that, all right, well, I can be whatever I want to be, but I got to bust my butt to get to it. I got to put in now we don't really see a lot of people. We don't see many people doing that.
Okay. Well, that's a great point, because I learned a very valuable lesson my senior year in high school, right? And so when I was in high school, at the time, I didn't know about your accumulative GPA. I didn't know about that, right? And so I had calculated in my mind, okay, I need 18 credits to go to college, and to do this and to play football and blah, 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 right? I didn't know all 4 years added up to your AGPA. And so I was cutting school as a sophomore, and I still had to calculate how I'm going to get my 18 credits and graduate and do all of this. And so my sophomore year, I totally, just wasted it, just trying to have fun and everything, And my senior year, I became more focused, because then I found out about the AGPA and all of that. And it was like, wow, I have to, really put forth an effort if I want to, go to college and do those things. And the last semester, the second semester, I kind of fluffed it off a little bit. I just thought that I was going to graduate and everything. And I had two teachers. And it was my one of my science teachers and a math teacher. And they came to me and they were like, well, you're not going to pass. And I said, I'm like, well, why are you doing this to me? right? Like they're the reason I didn't do my homework and stuff like that, right? And they're like, we're not doing anything to you. You know, you didn't do the work. I'm like, but I know the information. I know what I'm talking about. I know the stuff. There's like, yeah, you knew it, but you didn't do the work, right? You didn't do the work. So we're not going to pass you on what you know. You're failing because of what you didn't do.
Right.
Right. So what you said reminded me of that. Now it taught me a very valuable lesson, early on in my life. And I still remember that to this day. And that's why I work hard, that coupled with what my grandparents told me. Again, I was young. So, I still did goofy things, but I still had everything that I needed to be successful, even at a young age. But, I was just acting foolish. Yeah. But that right there taught me, you got to do things. You got to get things done. You have to put forth an effort if you want to be successful. You just can't know stuff. You have to do stuff. So I'm glad I learned that then, because I could be paying for that now. I have family members that didn't learn that lesson when they were younger, and they're doing things now that we did when we were teenagers. And it's like, yeah, that's stuff that kids do. You can't be a grown person doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a sad situation when you're almost 50 and you're doing stuff that a 15-year-old would do. Yeah. You don't want to be that kind of a person,
I think we need to start to reintegrate success-based satisfaction rather than.
How old are you?
15. because
success-based satisfaction.
Success-based satisfaction.
Really, right?
Because you're more likely to achieve results if the satisfaction of the results is better than the satisfaction of starting. Now, your first little bit into it, you're going to notice differences, and that'll be satisfactory. That'll cause satisfaction. But, once you hit the end of that track, it's like, yeah, like I just did something, and that just grows from there. But, parents, we don't want to ruffle our kids' feathers because.
What do you mean we?
Yeah. So, what's crazy?
How old are you again?
He was talking, and I was like, he was talking, and I was setting in my mind not to say we. Yeah. When we were talking about parents,
because as parents, we.
And
but it's easier to say we than say you.
Yeah.
Parents, dad.
Yeah.
Talking about you, dad.
It's like parents seem not to want to ruffle their children's feathers because if I force them to do this, or if I force them, I won't get as much out of them, or I'm not gonna get cooperation out of them at the home. Which it's possible. It's possible. It's highly likely.
But why though? I mean, that if you're having a problem communicating with your child, like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 or whatever, that means you didn't put in the legwork to communicate with them when they were younger.
Right.
And that's a huge deal. Like my children, I was like, we were reading to them like when they were in the womb, and I had conversations when they were in the womb, and that didn't stop when they were born. I didn't use baby talking. I was talking to them just like I'm talking to you right now.
Right.
And as they grew up, we still maintained that communication, and of course, teenagers will be teenagers, hormones, emotions, things like that. I had a situation with my oldest son, and, he was like working out, so he was getting all strong and everything. And, I didn't know how to handle that. And, that phase, even though I went through it myself, but I've changed a lot since I was a teenager, and I just wasn't expecting that. And so I realized that I needed to make some changes, or else it was going to be some conflicts. And, he wasn't like rowdy or anything like that. But, the dialogue wasn't where I desired it to be.
Right.
It was kind of aggressive from both of us, And I remember saying to myself, if he was married right now and he had children, what I'd say to him, like, hey, you need to go and take out the garbage, or you need to do the dishes, or, you need to vacuum the floor, go clean up your room. What I talk to him like that, because that's how most parents talk to their children, Right. It's like we just give instructions without considering how they're being received, And of course, as a parent, you have a right to say, hey, you should clean up your room, do your dishes, fold up your clothes, Parents have rights to do that, but, we have to consider that we're talking to young people, So when I thought about that, I was like, if I'm not going to talk to him when he's a husband and a father like that, with that tone, that parental tone that we're all familiar with, then why should I have that tone now?
Right.
And so I changed my tone with him, and I started talking to him like he was a husband and a father, that respect that a man would give another man. And then it kicked me like, wow, was I being disrespectful? And I guess it could be perceived as disrespect, even though I don't feel I was being disrespectful. But again, I had to look at it the way that
Perception
he
is
could.
very powerful.
Right. You know, I had to look at it the way that he could possibly be perceiving it. And it's like, well, I don't want him to feel disrespected. So let me change. And the dynamics of our relationship changed because I actually decided to, you know, to just go the extra mile, which I'm responsible for. I'm the oldest, you know, I needed to be responsible for our relationship.
That's a really great point, because as a parent, you're not raising property, you're raising people.
Exactly.
You know, so you're raising them to be parts of society. So treat them with the respect that you would treat people.
That's why it's important for parents to get to know their children. To
Right.
really, I won't say get to know, because just to know their children is a little more vague than the point, because I think you start to the point where you forget that they're human beings.
Right.
Right. And I wouldn't go so far as to say property, but kind of you can see that. But I think and it kind of goes along to the what I'm gonna parental transparency, which I don't think we actually really defined.
Right.
Because it's not the full transparency, right? It's not the idea of, I think it's more personal transparency, but you have to say parental and then to kind of point out the parental aspect of it, which starts at a very early age, getting that communication going, and then sort of, you know, some of the biggest things would be like that ability to look at yourself, right, and turn the spotlight on yourself and be like, how am I being received, and then be able to, at a very early age, like you were saying earlier, when you do something wrong, be like, listen, I made a mistake or whatever, and have that sort of transparency, instead of, you know, often what occurs is we get this sort of sword and shield mentality where it's like, oh, I gotta block and stab back now that, okay, yeah, but just do what I told you or whatever. When we can't address, and this is the deal. If you don't raise children, you know, if you raise your children to be smart, then you got to be on your game. This is the issue. If you can raise dumb children that are just, you know, that you can just beat down and like try to teach them not to think about things and be critical about things. But if you raise logical children, you're gonna have to be able to deal with their logic. And if you don't deal with their logic, if you can't deal with their logic, you're gonna shut that down immediately. If you just immediately go, well, you know, I just said so just obey me. Yeah. Right. Now, obviously, you understand this goes to the idea of parental transparency, that there are times where you can't explain yourself. So it's not because I think you just say transparency, it's just all encompassing. Right. It's not all encompassing transparency. Like you're not always required to explain your decisions,
but it helps.
But you should be able to address questions of your decisions and not. And, you know, if someone says, hey, like, I don't understand, you know, this, whatever the ideas of fairness, and address those things early on, and also be able to address your own shortcomings.
Yeah, because I said so can be very dangerous. You know, there should be, it
doesn't encourage intelligent thought.
Exactly. And I'm not saying, like you said, that you have to explain every single time, because sometimes it's an emergency or you can't, but explaining when possible is very, very important.
So I think that there seems like there's a certain time when it's okay for a parent to be like, because I said so. You know, it seems like because the child is young enough to where they don't need an explanation. And if you don't give them an explanation, if you give them an explanation, they won't understand.
But can I add something though?
Yeah, go ahead.
The trust has to be built, because it can't be an unmerited because I said so. If you know, as long as the parent is being a great parent, because I said so holds value. Oh, dad said so, he must have a great reason because he's proven to have a great reason.
I'm sitting here, I'm listening. Not that I disagree with y'all. I'm thinking like, I don't know if I've ever told my children because I said so. Right. I don't know if I've ever said that to them, you know?
Right. Okay. Well, sorry, not to interrupt you. Because I said you is not sort of a blanket phrase, but it could be something as simple as someone just getting upset.
Because someone
when you said, why do I have to do this? And it's just been like getting upset that you're even asking questions.
Which is pretty common.
Or could be situations of like, hey, this doesn't seem right. And it'll just be like, well, you know, you just need to be obedient. Now you're being disobedient. Now you're being, or whatever. Those kind of ideas.
So.
I'm not saying that you necessarily did that, but that's
I get it. Because I'm really trying to think about these things as well while I'm listening to you. And I'm really trying to focus in on the parental transparency. And the one thing that keeps popping in my mind concerning that, as far as transparency, is like, I think every parent needs to consider, or at least think about like, what type of relationship do I want with my children? Right? What type of relationship do I want with my child? And then, you know, everything else will be really made open. It'll be transparent. You know, if you want to communicate, if you really want to be a part of that child's life, then you're not going to say because I said so. That's like an and I don't want to offend anyone when I say this, but that's like a lazy reason to get things done.
Right.
And that's why I was thinking, like, have I ever told my children that? Because if I say, hey, look, you need to do the dishes, if they said why, I'm like, well, because if you don't, then you'll have rats and bugs and this and that. And you have to take the time to explain it. And it's like,
a great explanation.
So we need to do the dishes or else it could be infested with things that we don't want in our house, ants and things like that. And I don't care how clean your house is. If you live out in the country, you're going to see ants.
Yeah.
But you can minimize that by keeping a clean house, But, just saying because I said so, I've never said that. I really don't think I've ever said that because I've been really busy, but I've never really been busy enough to where I couldn't at least give a off the cuff answer to where it's enough until I could thoroughly explain it later. Right.
That's really
and I'm not a perfect dad by any means, but some of these topics we're talking about.
But you have a great relationship with your children.
I have an excellent relationship with my children.
And they're teenagers and grown up at this point. So that's incredible. It says something.
I was actually about to bring up what you said. Whereas bringing out the logic standpoint, because many times you tell your children, "Hey, go do the dishes," and they'll be like, "Why?" Right? They'll be like, "Why do the dishes?" Because I told you so, or because they're piling up. But those aren't really solid. No. Those aren't really solid explanations.
And then, how would you feel? I didn't mean to cut you off, but as a child, I remember my parents saying those things to me, and I remember how I felt, like angry, like, I'll never see you doing the dishes.
Yeah.
All it does is build up resentment. But if that's the relationship you want with your child, then keep using those types of answers and responses and watch the wall starts to divide you. And if you don't want that, if you want a better relationship, then you're going to have to communicate. You have to turn off Oprah. Talk to
one of the biggest things I've seen shut insubordination down is those logical questions. Why do I have to do the dishes? Do you want rodents in the house? Do you want rats running around?
Do you want food? Because if you don't have a clean plate, you're not going to have anything to eat.
And then I'll be like, dumb me, I should have thought of that.
But it's so easy to say. Because the issue is it's convenience, right? It's so easy to just be like, why are you asking stupid questions? Because you're going like, obviously, to be the devil's advocate. You're going like, because this is also a problem. Not with children, because I don't have any children, with people I have sometimes, where it'll just be like, why are you asking stupid questions? Like, whatever. So it'll be like, so it'll be in your head where it's like, okay, it's like, because the dishes like obviously need to be clean. Nobody wants to eat. So you're just like, why do you need to? They need to be washed, and I'm busy right now. Like, it's like, so in your head it gets to the point where it's just like, why are you asking these dumb questions? It's like, clearly this is the situation or whatever. And so it gets so convenient. It's just like it gets so convenient to sort of expect your children to just do what you say whenever you say it. It's convenient to expect them. And at an early age, that's how it kind of is, where it's just like, son, come here. And he's just like, okay, generally, he's like, what are we doing? And it's like, hey, go hand me that, when they're really young. And so you kind of fall into that convenience. And then you give them chores, all these things.
Right.
So now you don't have to do that job because someone else is doing it. And so it kind of sort of gets this convenient, because I think that need to slow down, because there's something to that point, the thought there, because it's like the children shouldn't be the only one washing the dishes. I'm not gonna because that's not a end all be all. Like, if that's how you run your house, where everyone has a job, your job is the dishes, and this person's job is this, whatever. But in general, like the idea of like if you're just sitting in your couch and just having your children do everything and you just do nothing. It's the idea of sort of shared responsibilities, because that's the entire idea behind all of that, right? Is teaching your children these, because it's more than just like, it's more than just, right? Like the rodents and all these things. Because then, why do I have to do the dishes?
Right.
Like, okay, well, you need to learn how to raise yourself, how to take care of yourself. One day you're going to be an adult and you're going to have to wash your own dishes. And you realistically, like everybody you can't just go buy a million paper plates and just use paper. I mean, no one's going to stop you.
Again, all of this starts with children being at a young age and parents and, adults, learning specific things, like as an adult, you're going to be stressed out from work. You're going to, like me early on, right? Like I said earlier, I would come in, I'll be like, hey, I come home and dishes need to be done, garbage needs to be taken out, and, the floor needs to be vacuumed, things like that. It's easy to come home after 8, 10, 12 hours and just say, hey, why this stuff not done?
Yeah.
Out of frustration.
It
should be, right? It should be. And again, as I was, growing as a father, I would just come home. I'm not mad at anybody. It's just, just my tone of voice, like, why this not done? Why this not done? Let's get this done. Let's get that done. But again, because I had a great relationship with my children, I could see that it was, kind of.
Because the response is, wow, you just come home barking.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
How was your day?
Right. But then from my perspective, it's like, if I come home, why am I walking in to things that need to be, that should be dealt with?
It's great because both perspectives are right. Because I'm here now. Like, I used to be in that position. I used to not get it. Whereas, like, just leave me alone. Like, go do this every time. And I do think that, yes, you should kind of understand that, you should kind of, it should be handled better. But at the same time, like, you're working, you're providing. And then you come home and it's like, specifically people have been there all day. And you're just like, so many things are just like, you shouldn't just let this pile up.
Should it be done? Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're dealing with young people, right, and that's goes back to like what I was talking about dealing with my son, is like, if I can talk to him like this at this point, then how come I can't address him like this now? And again, it just changed the way that I dealt with them. So instead of coming home and barking because I'm tired and frustrated, then I come home and I'm still dealing with children. And this was before they were all teenagers. I had a few teenagers and a couple younger ones, and it's like, come home. All right, so who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And it's like,
kind of take a leadership role.
Right. And then, I might grab the vacuum cleaner. So you kind of got to jump in and help out. But again, it's what kind of a relationship do you want with your children?
Right. Because you want them to be looking forward to when dad comes home and be like, wow, dad's come home. It's great to see dad. Not, dad's home. He's going to come and start yelling at us, and we better get this stuff. So it's a
here's something
dynamic.
funny. I just found this out like last week. My children were telling me like, because sometimes I would come home and everything would be done, and I'm like, and I would praise them for it, right? Like, man, great job, blah blah blah. And it was like, yeah, Dad, we found out. No, how did they say it? Yeah, when we knew you were coming home, if we heard the vehicle, we'd all jump up and start cleaning up really, really fast. And it was like, we can get the whole house cleaned up in like 3 minutes. And I'm like, okay, that's great to know. They just told me that, right? Yeah. I'm like, all right, y'all, all right, well, cool deal, I just thought it was funny. It's
gets it done.
They get it done, right? Yeah. But then they were like, but it was just surface cleaning. Like, we would hide like dishes in the stove. Just putting things in cupboards and, it's just a surface cleaning. Then, when I left to go do something else, then they'll get it done. But this is what children do, And so I couldn't do anything but
they want
laugh.
to see their dad joyful.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
So it was just funny. I just, I'm like, wow, y'all wait till everybody's pretty much grown up and then tell me you're hiding dishes in the stove. That's funny.
It's safe to bring it up now.
Yeah, it's like, I think the statute of limitations for spankings is out the window now. So,
Yeah, well, the importance, because the importance of all of those things. It's like, it's kind of interesting because this is kind of a recurring topic we talk about, really parenting. And really, it is the core of our world. It is where everyone comes from, like parents, basically. It really is. It's the core of, but it's like, it kind of gets, so often it kind of gets put in the back burner. It's not a common conversation you have in the mainstream. Everybody's talking about their life, and no one's, parenthood isn't trending. It doesn't trend, right? You have all these people doing it or whatever, and no one's talking about but this is the core of your entire society, this is where what your society turns out to be, your community turns out to be is based on the parenting, which we've talked about in the past, the importance of community. But that community, comes from families, which is in parenting, right? And so it's like, we don't even really talk about all of these sort of ideals, right? And who, everybody, and there is no training for it, right? There is no like no one comes to your house and is like, all right, so you're going to be a parent. Like, here's the parenting book on how to raise children. Here's so this is what, this is how, you just kind of, so, and I think sort of the downfall of society, but this is how we're made, which is people are physically capable of making children before they're physically capable of raising children.
Right.
And so you just have, it's like, it's almost depressing when you see someone, you're a moron. Like, what?
What are you doing with a
a
kid?
horrible person already, and now you have a child coming.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be a terrible dad. In these situations, people are like, this is where you get child neglect, and you have so many
Seen
situations.
a lot of that growing up also. You know, I mean, it was really, really bad in like the 80s and 90s, teenage girls having babies and things like that, But then one of the words that you keep bringing up is family. Family, family, family. And it's like, you'll have this teenage girl, and then by the time she graduates high school, she'll have 2 or 3 or more children and they'll have multiple fathers, it'll be multiple men involved in those situations, so it's like, how do you stop that? How do you get the core values of what a family is and what it takes to actually bring up an individual to be a positive member of society? How do you do that? Right. And it's a tough fight, right. Especially when you have people today with these ideals that, you can identify as a puppy in school if you want to. And if you don't bark at this person, then you're going to get suspended because now you're offensive. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know how far you want to go on this show, so you can stop me at any time. Insane. But it gets so ridiculous that people don't even, identify as human beings. It's like you're in school with like cat paws on because you think you're a cat. Are you kidding me? Right. And you want to be what? Secretary of State, President of the United States? Get out of here.
We create environments where personal realities become everybody else's reality. What I think I am in my brain, I'm forcing you to be. Okay.
Hold on. I want to subscribe to. This is the show. All right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get us canceled. This is the one. I was having a conversation about this today, actually. And I made this statement, right? Because like, you have all these things out there. And I just, someone says they're bisexual or they're whatever. And I just go like, when someone says they're bisexual, I just know you're stupid. You're just really dumb. Because like, it's just, it's going back to what I'm saying. You're not qualified to run your own life. It's like, you're just running everything based on these emotions. Like that's what. As soon as when I ever first heard pansexual, I was like, I already know how was created. Like somebody's just an emotional person, and they were like, I just love everybody. I must be pansexual. I'm attracted to everyone because I just love everybody. And it's like it's gotten like it's insane, right? So it's like, you're young. It's like you got all these strong emotions. I've made this statement before. You got all these powerful emotions and you don't know how to control them. And why would you know how to control them? You've only been experiencing them so many years. Everyone else experiences emotions. This is the thing, right? This is the thing we take for granted. Everyone else experiences emotions. Okay? So everyone before you experienced same amount of emotions, right? You want to think, well, but I experience them more. Really, it's selfish. It's like, but they're my emotions. They're not your emotions. So these ones are the ones that matter. But everyone before you has experienced similar emotions. So one, in general, to get the idea, to have the thought in your head that other people can't understand and their advice would be inapplicable is stupid, right? When someone who's been here longer on this earth than you and experienced emotions longer than you is like telling you, hey, like you shouldn't like act on those emotions and listen, this is how, and your just thought is like, yeah, well, what would you know? Which is not necessarily the first thought, but that really is the underlying thought, right? So when you're sitting here going, yeah, it's not going to be me, you're really saying, what would you know? Right? You're taking for granted all of the other person's experience and where their advice is coming from. And you're thinking, I'm going to be different because I'm different. You just don't understand. You don't understand the emotions I'm going through. You don't understand what it's like to just like love everybody.
You know what's crazy about that? So when you're dealing with logic, do you know what the monkey wrench to logic is? Emotions, right? Emotions, because then people start acting on how they feel instead of actually bringing things to a logical conclusion. There's a lot of
what's crazy is people can develop flawed logic based on those emotions. And they'd be like, no, I'm thinking logical.
Yeah, no.
So it's like, going, listen.
But you're being governed by the emotions.
There are people out there, right, in the world who are doctors on these kind of things that just came from how someone feels. And there are doctors of like explaining to you how it's valuable and like makes sense and it's not, crazy that you could feel like you're a puppy.
Yeah,
There are people out there who are developing this sort of logic based on just...
So who's that person, doctor? You know, that's who I would like to talk to.
Talk to the big
Who's
boss.
his doctor telling him that it's okay to tell this person that it's okay that they can be a puppy?
Well, you know, a lot of times the problem with that is society has sort of become, society is developing around like it's almost like medicine, the medicine practice. Oftentimes they don't go after the actual problem. They go after the symptom of the problem. So, for instance, I want instant coffee. So there's a market for instant coffee. So we're going to make instant coffee. I want, you know, they're going to, instead of dealing with the situation where it should be dealt with, they just cater to whatever people feel, because it makes money. And it's easier, it's simpler, it's less, there's less work, there's less training that has to go into anything when you just deal with, this is how you feel. Let's cater to that. Let's build a thing around it. Let's do all this other stuff instead of showing them maybe the dangers of it or how it can actually, you know, ruin their life. Because a lot of people regret these decisions later on in life.
Yeah. So what you said something earlier, you said life is real, you know, and in real life is tough. You know, there's heartbreak, there's financial stress, there's emotional stress, there's relationship stress, there's all kind of stressors. And like you said there today, all that stuff is kind of being done away with. You know, you show up, you lose, and you get a participation certificate or something like that. I heard recently, it might have been last year, I don't remember how long ago it was. It might have been 2 years, but it might have been a football game or something, a high school or whatever. And one school like blew another team out like 100 to like nothing or 7, whatever. It was like a really large score. And the coach from the winning team was suspended because you heard about that? Yeah. And so they like fired him or suspended him or something because of how bad they beat the other team. Right. It was like, you really beat these guys down. It's
but
like,
they put forth the work and they put in the effort.
Right.
It was legit.
They were that better of a team. They were an excellent team, and this team didn't have as much skills, and it reflected in the score.
Right.
I've never, when I was growing up, it just would have made me, we lost games when I played football, and it's just like, man, my coach said, never hold your head down, because if you worked hard, you know, you go over there, you shake that man's hand because he did a better job than you, and then you just work harder and you do better.
Exactly.
You know, and you're only going to do the best you can. Yeah, we didn't get participation trophies. It just made us stronger, you know, and then it taught us like the disappointment of failure. And I don't like failing.
Right.
I don't like that feeling. So it just made me want to work harder so I wouldn't fail. But at the same time, not be a bully. You know, when we went and shook people's hands like, hey, great game, guys, you know, or whatever. It's like encouraging others, like, you know, you do better next time. You know, we'll see you next year, depending on how old you are, what grade you're in, you know. And a lot of those guys we saw year after year, you know, they might have won the freshman year. We might have won our sophomore year, whatever. But, you know, you grew up together competing, making each other stronger. Right. You know, and I'm just using that as a loose example. Yeah. No, but it was none of this whole, you know, everybody's the same. It's not, everybody's not the same.
They're not.
We're not, you know, and that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that we're, you know, if you work hard, you're going to get different results, you know, and that's just the reality of it.
See, that's the thing, right? We, you know, it was just like, this was reality and this was life, right? For so many years. And we turned normal things in life to problems. Normal things in life are things to need to be addressed. It was like, this is life. Like, if you want something, you got to work hard for it, right? This is how it was. And you got to deal with pain and struggle. And we turned it into, no, pain and I'm not saying like, okay, all pain and struggle is great, but pain and struggle is bad. If you're working for something, it should just be easy. And if there's a problem, then someone needs to step in and help you and fix that and just take away all your struggle. It's like we talk about this from, you know, in many of our podcasts, in a lot of our podcasts, the importance of the struggle in introducing struggle with your children, you know, because a lot of people, you know, think of their life as what they can impart to their children, but they think of it in the physical means. Like, I'm going to go work hard and make a bunch of money so my children can live very well. And then you raise spoiled children who don't get all these characteristics. Struggle,
poor parenting.
It's horrible parenting, because struggle, it builds character. It literally builds character. I know it's cliche. I know everyone struggle builds, the journey is real, whatever. Struggle, it builds character, right? And when we don't allow our children to struggle, we're depriving them of great character, of skills, numerous skills. But it's gotten to this overall, everyone just like is running away from the struggle, is running away from the hurt. No pain, no gain, man. Everyone's running away from it. Not everyone. A lot of people are running away from it. And they're going like, we shouldn't have to get struggle. And they're just like, struggle is bad and pain is oh, why would I want to do that? It hurts. So it's like, obviously it can be taken too far, and like if you break a bone, whatever. But generally, like that means you're growing, right? Mm-hmm. If something's uncomfortable, if it's difficult, right, you're going to work to get, if your circumstances, you're going to work to get past that. Right. But there is like mentally, even just the mentally. That's why I'm talking with Nate, which the episode that y'all should go watch.
Listen to. I can't watch it.
Watch the screen and be like, man, this is a great Spotify logo or whatever the logo is. I opened up that one talking about the cold exposure. And because we were talking a little bit about the science of it, with Andrew Huberman. He wasn't on it, but we were talking about the stuff he watches. Maybe we'll do it.
Andrew Huberman.
The stuff that we watch on.
We want to talk to you.
Yes. But, about the health, how like great it is for the mind. And the main thing about the cold, right? There's all these positive things they're getting about people taking cold plunges and all these things. And it's not the cold itself. It's the discomfort and the pain and the struggle that do it. It's the discipline of being like, man, I don't want to step in this freaking freezing tub of water right now. But what kind of strength and discipline it takes to go in there and do that? It's the ability, mental plasticity, but the ability to train your mind to remain calm when you're in physical discomfort. You're standing here freezing in this cold water, but you're training your mind to calm down. You're actively working on calming because that's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to just go in there and scream or whatever. You're actually focusing on your breathing. You're focusing on, and that is a corollary to life. Now you're in a position that's at high intensity, high stress, and you're able to because it's a muscle. You've worked this muscle, this practice of okay. I'm used to stress, right? I'm comfortable working in stress, right? It's to become comfortable being in discomfort, right? And that is what builds the most powerful people.
Right.
And we've deprived people of that in society today in a lot of ways. Kind of harkening to the podcast we had with Tyreek. I don't want to go too far on that because listen, if we ever make it big, if we ever make it famous, some doctor talking about, clinical psychology, all these things, and clinical depression, all these things. But like we were saying in the podcast, a lot of depression is just like, yeah, everybody's sad, my friends. I'm sorry. Like I'm not gonna go so far as to say there's no such thing as depression.
That's definitely
but
right.
a lot of it is like just like, okay, it's raining outside. Like, all right, it's rainy day blues, man. You don't need pills for that. I'm sorry. And I'm not going to feel bad for you. Right. It's like, but what I was thinking of was, and I'm talking a lot here when you were talking about the doctors, it's like people who do though address the underlying issues, right? They get attacked. Oh, yeah. It's like with the coronavirus. It's like this movement with fat people. It's like, and I have every talk. They go into the doctor. Like, every time I go to the doctor, like all my problems are just immediately about my weight. Like that's what, and that's like not fair. But it's like, we're
that's
just
where your problems
nutrition
are coming from.
And all these, everything that goes with that, nutrition, all those things don't matter. It's like with the virus, this virus was like occurring and they were talking about like all these things. They're going like, what about like, we should be, they're not encouraging. There's people saying like, okay, you're over here talking about these shots and things. You're talking about the majority of people who are actually dying from this are in poor health, right? And not just old people, like people who are just in like overweight and poor health and they need to focus on their overall health, right? First, but it's got to be a disease.
Well,
it's got to be a disease.
So I don't know if we're going to get into this, but it's like, how can you expect like the people to know about nutrition when the doctors don't even know about nutrition?
That's true.
Right.
The doctors are not knowledgeable about how the body functions and what it needs in order to repair itself, to heal itself. They'll give you a pill which will cause all these side effects.
It's all guesswork.
It's guesswork. They have no idea how the body works. So, and so you expect the people to know, it goes back to education. Right. You pretty much have to be self-taught, because doctors will get upset, when you start questioning them about, well, why do I need to take this? Or why are you giving this to my child or my wife? They'll get upset like, well, I'm the one with the degree. I went to school for this many years. So what does it do? What does it do? Well, it really doesn't do anything pertaining to your wife's situation, but just in case. It's like, then we don't need it. You know, it's ridiculous. And that's based off a true situation. I know, man, he just told me the situation.
It's like we've come to this point where it's like science I don't want to say it's all guesswork. We're really all doing this guessing. And now it's expected to be taken as law. And we know for a fact, like these things, everything, all that takes time. It's all guesswork. We're literally going like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Let's wait. Let's try this and see what occurs. And then we go, well, he said it was this. It's, if you say it's good, it's got to be that. And then as always, more information comes in, and very often it's okay. Well, it changes. But you're not allowed. Like some people, you're not even allowed to question and go like, whatever. I go, no, I'm a doctor, so like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then next week he goes, oh. Or not next week, but this is exaggeration. But next week he goes, oh, we found out those pills had lead in them. We have to recall those.
So do you know what the third leading cause of death is in the United States?
Medical malpractice.
MD-related deaths. Yeah. The third leading cause.
It seems like what we keep coming back to is the appreciation aspect of things, and it gets used a lot. People use that word a lot when it's not even. Some situations it's warranted. Other situations it's just too big of a word to use, because we think we're owed something. We think that this is my office, this is the way that I feel. So you have to treat me this way. But we don't you should appreciate being in the race. It doesn't matter if you win or not. You need to appreciate being in the race. No, you're not going to get a trophy because you're 14th. You're the 14th person. Like you're in the back. You're not going to get a trophy, but you should appreciate the opportunity of getting in a race. And those who don't appreciate the opportunity, those who just look it over and think that they expect it, are the ones who you get, changing their identities. And, because there is not one single group of people that will trip more than people who separate themselves from the rest of society. I'm, non-binary or something. And if you accidentally call them male, watch out, So there's an aspect of being thankful, understanding where you are and not taking it for granted, putting your best into it. And then there's the aspect of appreciation, knowing that you're not owed anything. Well, there are certain things that you are owed, respect, you're owed, freedoms. There are certain freedoms that you're owed. But when it comes down to your standing in society, when it comes down to, your intellect in the minds and your mind and your image in the minds of other people, they don't have to think you're smart. They don't have to think that you're, a useful part of society. Those are things that you have to prove, right? And many people can't. They just don't do it, nowadays. We think that we're owed something. We think that equality and equality of outcome are the same thing, So,
well, I think a big part of society that is a problem is the pursuit of happiness rather than the pursuit of fulfillment.
Right.
Because happiness is almost there's instant gratification.
Happiness is more emotional.
Exactly. And everything you do, you're just trying to be happy. And that can lead you down some crazy paths without realizing that responsibility is very important. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes things are difficult. But I'm doing it in order to be fulfilled by, I'm helping people, or I'm actually doing something for the society, the community. I'm doing something for myself. And that'll lead to the fulfillment.
Things like that go a lot into how honest a person is with themselves, how self-aware a person is with themselves, which we'll touch on in a second. Let's go ahead and take a break. So, I had Israel and I on the other day, had a disagreement. He said to me, Isaiah, and so he got mad and he said, Isaiah, stop being an idiot. Just be yourself. I said, make up your mind. Get another clap. All right, we got 3 claps just to line it up. That was great. Those 2 dead jokes. Everybody's gonna have. Everyone is gonna laugh as hard as you just did. Also, you laugh when he laughed. He laughed. Well, I say it's that.
Yeah, because see, here's the thing. I don't want to encourage you because you just don't stop. You just keep going. He's like he'll tell one and he's done. So it's okay to laugh. With you, I'm like a lot of them will be funny, but it's like I'm not encouraging that behavior.
Did I tell you? My wife said she's gonna break up with me. She's gonna divorce me.
Oh boy.
Because of my addiction to telling dad jokes.
No.
And she said I gotta give it up. And I said, well, how do I give up this addiction? She said, Whatever means necessary. I said, no, it doesn't.
What? See, that's what I don't even get that.
Whatever doesn't mean necessary. I should have said literal.
You know what?
All right, we gotta get into this.
All right, so we're back on.
But so I've been thinking about starting a math university for midgets. I haven't really landed on a name, but I think I'm gonna call it making the little things count. So,
okay.
All right,
See, I was wrong. I can't encourage you either. I was wrong.
Okay.
I'm
last
still
one.
growing.
Last one. Then we're going back in the podcast.
Oh, this not going on the podcast?
No, this is still in the podcast, but we're going back to our conversation.
Oh.
This is our behind the scenes footage. I saw a midget nun the other day.
Say what now?
I saw a midget nun the other day.
Okay.
I said, "Oh, ye of little faith."
All right. Okay. So we're on the podcast. All right. So
all right, we've been on this. This is all going live. So we're talking about people not being self-aware. That's where we kind of ended off there. Which I think is the issue, because you were talking about fulfillment and people chasing fulfillment and people chasing happiness. But the issue is like people aren't even aware of themselves. That's the other thing. You have all this emotionality, or whatever, but people aren't even aware of themselves, like what fulfills them. That's how people can run into situations where they're head first into something that's draining them. They're not even aware of like what is giving them. So they're here, and they're like, people will be asking themselves, like, man, why do I feel so like exhausted in this situation or whatever? Often, people aren't honest and self-aware, extremely unaware of themselves, and that's what kind of like makes it so difficult, because
in every area of life, though,
in every
area of life,
let me get closer to the mic.
In every area of life,
I think that's the big thing too, because in the same way you need to be aware of how you're killing your productivity and draining yourself, stopping yourself from being able to do things, you need to be aware of your standing, of your responsibilities, and of how much you help. Because I was thinking about it during the break. People will trip, they'll stress out, I do this for every day. I've been doing this every day for the last 5 years and I haven't been noticed. Nobody ever notices me. And it sounds like it's coming from a selfish standpoint, but everybody needs to get noticed. It's a legitimate standpoint.
Everyone needs to feel appreciation.
Yeah.
But you know what? The guy who cleans the floor in the gymnasium so everybody can shoot hoops, right? Nobody notices him. Everybody just walks past and plays the game. The day he misses, everybody's like, man, where's that guy at? Right? And people will be like, I miss one day and y'all are tripping that I'm not here. But when I'm here, everybody misses me. No, it's something for you to appreciate, because my standing is so much in the community that nobody's just like, oh, that guy's not here, right? They notice I'm not here, right? And they see what I do, and people don't notice that. You want to be on the court, you want to be shooting, you want to be doing other things, but you have to notice that what you're doing is not going to be, what you're doing is supporting what you want to do.
That's an interesting point. And on the flip side, I'm kind of different. I'm kind of different. If I'm doing something, to me, it doesn't even matter if someone notices or not, because if I'm doing it, there's a reason why I'm doing it. I'm cleaning that gymnasium floor because I have a wife and children at home that need me to bring home money to buy food and provide a home for them. So whether or not people notice me or not, really, to me anyway, is irrelevant. And again, you do want to be appreciated, but at the same time, that's not going to determine whether or not I'm going to do the job or how well I do the job. Because if I have a responsibility, and this is where these things come in, at being responsible, being self-aware. If I have a responsibility to a family, then I have to do the job. This is not about my ego,
right?
Or how I feel about, well, do they think that I'm doing a great job? If I'm not doing a great job, I'm gonna end up looking for another job because I'm getting fired.
Yep.
So I mean. But again, to function as a society, we do have to pay attention to all of those things. But again, I'm not going to, if we're working and, I find out that you're making more money than me. Well, why is he making more money than me? That's not fair. I've been here 15 years. He just showed up last month.
Right.
Well, my agreement with the company isn't the same agreement that you had. If I want to make more money, I can go and ask, but I can't be mad that you're making more than me. Right. It's
that idea of entitlement. Like, you're not entitled to isn't that what you perceive to be fair? Like,
right.
It's only fair you make whatever you make the same amount. And I think at the same time, it's like, okay, people really they aren't, and they shouldn't necessarily always be required to thank you for what you're supposed to do.
Right.
So it's like, and even go back when we talk about the chores with the children or whatever. It's like, okay, you go out of your way, but it's like, hey, listen, it's like, I can run into the situation where it's like, okay, this thing needs to be done every day, and so it's like, okay, if you're telling a person, every day they need to do this thing, and they're just not doing it, right? And then I understand the idea, like one day they do it, right? I understand the idea of like trying to be positively encouraging, but then they come back the next day and do it, and you go, why didn't you do that? You go, well, I did it yesterday, and you didn't even say thank you. I go, well, no, you're supposed to do it every day. So it's like your job is to provide for your family, right? So it shouldn't be like, well, I go out there and I provide. It's like, okay, it's like it's actually a conversation recently I had with you and Nate. We're talking about where it's like, oh, he said it was I said I'm working on this, I'm working on this. I'm consistently working on being a better person. And he was like, that has nothing to do with us. What is the idea of like, yeah, everyone's supposed to be doing that, right? And so it's like you should, and I didn't understand at first, but when you're just like, okay, kind of being like, hey, I'm working. It's like, yeah, everyone is.
Yeah.
If you're going, like, listen, I go to work every day. Everyone's supposed to be going to work every day. Some people aren't, but it's like everyone's going to work today. It's okay. That's your job to be responsible. You're supposed to be working on yourself. And it's nothing to your like, I mean, yes, it's great, it's positive, all these things, but it's nothing to be like bragging about, and to your kind of credit to be like, look at me, I'm working on everyone's doing it. It's like, look at me, I go to work every day, and yeah, it's your responsibility, right? It's just that, we've kind of gotten to the point where certain people accepted like that they don't have to do these things.
Right.
So you start to get a position. It's great to be appreciated, and people should be appreciated. But in the right area, in the right position, and I do understand. I'm not unempathetic, because I do understand what it's like to be there, like doing something, and putting in a crazy amount, and then like people are just like,
not considering.
I mean, on the other hand, when you're doing something, and you're like exhausted, like you're putting in an insane amount, and you're overwhelmed, and they're like, oh, why didn't you do this? Or they're like, well, this thing you did was horrible. Terrible. You did a horrible job. So then you just, and then the next day it's like, but where are you? Weren't you over here doing this thing?
Yeah.
So you understand, I understand, you understand the emotionality of it, right? You understand that, but it goes back to what we're talking about. When you start living your life and reacting to everything based on emotion, right? Specifically as men, that's bad.
Right.
That's a really bad way to.
What was that? I missed the last.
When you
part.
start living your life and making the way your decisions based on emotions.
I understand that completely. I heard a quote. It was a podcast or a clip from a podcast Jordan Peterson was on, and somebody was asking him. Many times Jordan Peterson will say, "As a man, you need to be a beast. You need to be ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be capable of
A monster, he says.
a monster," is what he says.
So how does that make you human?
Well, okay, so this is the
You're
thing
not.
about
If you're a
it.
beast, you're a monster. You're not human.
It's an interesting conversation.
So the guy
Listen.
asked him. This is the thing. The guy asked him. He's like, what do you say to those who say you're teaching people to be just erratic, violent, just lashing out and everything? He said, self-control is not a virtue if you're not able to go the opposite way. If you're not able to unleash yourself, nobody's going to say, wow, you really controlled yourself, because you had no other choice, right? But once you know that you're capable of doing certain things, and the point is not for you to go out and get jacked and, start learning Kung Fu or whatever. So, like, I could have really hurt you, but I controlled myself, The point is we have to know our limits and have to respect our limits, and then know when it's time to back off, know when it's time to keep those things under wraps.
See, okay, because here's the thing about that. One, you have to know your limits, but you don't necessarily have to test your limits.
Exactly. Guaranteed.
I think the underlying theme of that is true. The idea of but I see this is the issue there, because the underlying idea of being like, yes, you really should try to hold yourself to a certain standard. You should try to have try to become the best kind of version you can, and always try to become better. Right. And I think that you have to take in the colloquialism istic aspect of being a beast, and and if you're talking about like self-talk, then I would understand that, because the way I talk to myself is different than the way I deal with other people, and the standards. And when I don't do something, I speak to myself in a certain way, and some people might call that like negative self-talk or whatever. But first, the statement that self-control is not a virtue if you can't go the other way, right? My first thought was like, okay. Well, first I was like, it is true. It's like, obviously, like, if you have a certain strength, you're expected to kind of keep that under control. Right. So this is the world we live in, right? Where the world we live in is like, yeah, because the idea of self-control, like, it's true that it's an option, right? But it's almost coming back to what we're talking about, where it's like, if you're like, if I was like, hey, like, I really wanted to punch you, but I didn't. Okay, you're not supposed to punch me,
right?
Like, it's not like there's no sort of like, and it's not supposed to be like, listen, you need to understand, like right now, I am a beast and I can knock you out with one punch, but I'm such a strong man on the inside that I'm not going to touch you. Like that starts to get all sort of
cap.
Yeah, cap. That was not, you know what I'm saying? I was just putting on your persona. I was being Q from him. This is Q talking to Q. So because I think some of that aspects, not saying necessarily what he's saying, but the way people would take that does fall into that sort of expecting. I don't know how the best way to put it. Kind of expecting appreciation or gratification. But yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of people really misunderstand what Jordan Peterson says with that point, because a lot of times what he's not saying to go out and be the monster. He's saying everybody has the potential for extreme, he uses the word malevolence, or extreme horrible things. But a lot of people don't recognize that they have that. So like, I would never say this.
So that's going back to being self-aware.
Being very self-aware, understanding that you have the potential to be a very horrible person, and then learn how and come to grips with those parts of yourself. Because a lot of people genetically, they have some really crazy tendencies. So he said, mentally become that person, understand how you could be. That way you know how to conduct yourself properly.
Okay, see, if that's not explained properly, it can be
very, because
very bad.
And an example that he often uses is the Nazis in Nazi Germany, and a lot of the people that they had taken as workers and things like that. And he said that there were people who witnessed these people, and they said a lot of times the people who were among the oppressed, that were being oppressed by the Nazis, but that they were using as their handymen to do their work, were worse than the Nazis. And these are the people who should have been, timid and all this other stuff and not actually causing the problems, but they were worse because they were just being led by what they thought they had to do to go through their day-to-day lives. And he's saying, well, I like to take the time and think, where would I be in this position if I was in Nazi Germany and I felt forced to do something really horrible to people? And that's something really we can all think about, because that's a reality in their time. And they didn't think that they would be killing their fellow brothers and sisters, but everybody has the potential for some crazy stuff depending on the circumstances.
See, and that's what I was talking about earlier.
So don't say I would never do that, because you have the potential to do that based on the situation. So learn about it and say, I will never do that.
Yeah.
Because I've trained myself and I know that I shouldn't. So he also brings up the analogy of, is it better to be a gardener in a war or a warrior in a garden? Because, you've set yourself up to where you know exactly what you're capable of and what you can do, but you don't do it because you've trained yourself and you've developed that self-control that Barzilai was talking about. So you're a complete person now. People will call it embracing your dark side or whatever. You know both sides very well of yourself. So it makes you more well-rounded than someone who just doesn't know what they're capable of. And, well, I would never, and they're very timid and they don't. It's a stronger person.
And I think those... Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I get all of that, and people do come up with great thinking points, but to actually get someone to the point where they're actually making right choices is a lot different than saying great things to get people to think about. There's a whole, there's real life that have to be lived to where those things have to be put into practice. So, and I don't really know what this, what's his name? Peterson? Jordan Peterson. I don't know much about him, just by name only. And so, it sounds great. but to really have a positive impact on people's lives, you actually have to people need to be taught.
Exactly.
People need to be taught and they need to know how, certain things make them feel. Because again, if you feel a certain way, if you're not trained, you're going to respond a certain way. This is why, like children, when they feel disappointed, you take their pencil. One of the first things they do is they'll hit you. It's like, okay, why did you do that? You have to start talking to children at a very young age. Like, look, you can't hit your brother, or your sister, or your parent or anyone because, you're disappointed, and you have to start explaining these things so they can start getting a grip on these emotions and start learning how to control these things. If you try to train someone, after they're 30, and after they've murdered someone and you try to rehabilitate them, 30 years of no correction, it's too late then.
Right.
It's not necessarily too late, but it's going to be more difficult, I should say. These are the things that need to be dealt with. Parents need to deal with their children from a very young age so that we don't have these issues,
So I definitely think it's very, it's different depending on the situations and the circumstances. Because with that explanation there, I think that the idea, there's a difference to me. I think that the idea of being aware of oneself and aware of tendencies versus embracing that kind of language and exploring. So there's a difference between because in some of the ways, I don't think you should go and accept it. I think you should be aware of the negative aspects of yourself. I kind of okay. But first, let me ask you this: Do you consider? Would you call who you have been in the past to have once been a really violent person, extremely violent person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I just wanted you to say that. I don't want to have to say that myself.
No, that's fine.
Because I have a point.
Okay.
Which is okay. Well,
no, thinking about it,
Yeah. My point was the conversation we've had in the past, right? And this is why I think something like that would speak to someone like you in a certain situation, but not with everybody, right? We talked about that. Sometimes you'll joke about these things, right? About oh, I'll hit this, whatever. I don't want to use your calling card. You can use it, but and you would say that you do that to remind yourself.
I was trying to get you not to stop.
I was like, what is this dude doing? No, because
I was trying to tell you just keep talking.
Okay, yeah, we're going to keep going because he's not important anyways. But you do this to kind of remind yourself. I'm getting loud too. To remind yourself to kind of keep that in mind because of how easy it would be to kind of slip back into being that person. But see, that's that comes from your situation. But not everyone is in that position. So it's not everyone in society needs to kind of dive deep and become their worst self to understand it. So there's a difference between someone who's been a very bad version of themselves. And so now you're keeping in mind that part of yourself. You're keeping yourself aware of that and going, okay, I know that I'm not always I'm not always this. I could be a bad person. I could be a horrible person. And you've seen it personally. Not everyone, in the society, as we open this up, some of us are very fortunate not to have gone through certain things, have to have gone through certain things. Not everyone needs to, I think, to the extent of understanding them, in not understanding, but diving so deep and becoming, because that's kind of some language you'd used, this person, man, yeah. How they can get there. I think it's important to be aware. I think it's important. So I think the underlying idea there is there's two kind of points I think really that you're taking away from there that he's making, that underlying idea. One, the idea of putting yourself to standards, of becoming because it's not, I don't think it's necessarily about the danger, even though the fact is in today's society, you do need to be capable of danger, of being a dangerous person. And not necessarily a violent person, overly violent, but you do need to protect what belongs to you.
Yeah, because I'm still over here thinking, and it's I don't know if I ever was necessarily a violent person, but I did
have
violent things, right? So I did things, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But it was I was never all in. I was never,
Okay, let's put it this way: did you lack self-control?
Yeah,
and you have more now.
Yeah.
And so really what you're trying to remind yourself, because that's some of the same language you also used, you're trying to remind yourself that, you can lose control, that you have this control of this thing. Now, it's not necessarily you're always just ready to hurt somebody, you're always a violent person, but you're aware where you can go when you don't have control of yourself.
So let me tell you what I'm aware of. I'm aware of my feelings. Mm-hmm. I'm aware of my feelings because if you're not aware of your feelings, then, you can do some pretty bad things. So with my children, not that I'm violent towards my children, but one of my safe words is like, if I don't say shut up to my children, right? Now, if I get so frustrated or whatever, if I say shut up, I think I've only said shut up like once, maybe twice in all, their lives. But that's telling me that I'm so frustrated that I'm losing control. And so that's like my safe word, it's like, you know what? I'll say, you need to close your mouth right now because, blah, 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 whatever. I say close your mouth or something along those lines. But if I say shut up, to me, that's like disrespectful, talking to a child. It's even disrespectful saying that to a grown up. So saying shut up to me is disrespectful. So that's like, ooh, all right. You're not thinking logically. You're starting to be a little bit more emotional here. So check yourself. So that's just one of my safe words. So it's like, I'm aware of my feelings. I'm aware of how I feel, and that keeps me in check.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the point. And I think that's not, because it kind of almost, right, could kind of, you kind of, it's more like leaving how people can misunderstand it, could kind of lead, what's the word? Not lead, but kind of point kind of towards experience being the best teacher, which is not.
No.
Right. But the idea of like, it's just like, yes, this and this, but these are things you're aware of because of experience, but you don't necessarily need to experience that version of yourself and go that far. It's simply about having the ability to be that aware of yourself, right? To be aware, because I think that, which is a solid point, that people get to the idea of being like, yeah, I would never do this, I would never do that, and that's not necessarily true. And it's more about being aware of like what leads me down this road. Like, okay, it's like some Nate says a lot where he's like, if a man, someone raped a man's daughter, he can understand wanting to kill that person. Not that it's right, but it's like understanding, okay, because that's the kind of thing that could lead you to lose control. This is not, no, it doesn't mean you should be sitting there every day being like, man, what are the worst situations in my life or whatever. Right. Understanding yourself is really the underlying thing, going, okay, what in me, like what are my, it's more mental limits, right? It's more like what are, but it's not the experiencing of that. Right, it's not the going and going. It's
more
all right,
the inquiry.
Yeah, it's more of it's more mental, and this is the issue is why that's so outstanding is so many. To me, that kind of idea isn't super outstanding because I'm really down with the idea of being super aware of yourself and super honest and critical of yourself. The reason why that's so outstanding in society is so few people are self-aware, are honest with themselves, are critical with themselves, are inquiring of
and
themselves.
Perfectly quick to judge other people for why they did what they did. But there's lately in life. Personally, and this is a personal decision I've made, probably based on these same sort of concepts, is like I'll walk into a situation and in the past I would probably say, man, I would never, get to like, and the situation I'm using, I'm kind of thinking y'all can read my mind, which you can't, is like, let's say I walk into a house and it's trash, like disgusting, to the state of just being, how in the world can somebody live here like this? But somebody is living in this situation. But it's just disgusting. And, immediately in our mind, we're like, I could never do this. But they're doing it. They're a pretty normal person just like you, maybe not, but whatever. And they've gotten low enough mentally to where they're allowing themselves to just sit in this rotting mess of a house. And instead of saying, I could never live like this, I think to myself, well, what would take me to this level? What would have to occur in my life? And in my mind, what state of mind would I have to be in to where I would allow myself to live like this?
It's a form of empathy.
And it is. It's a form of empathy. It puts you in their shoes. And it also allows you to realize, what kind of state they might be in and what would have to drag you down to that level, because you can get pretty low in life.
All right. So this is interesting because when you were talking about that before you explained how, your line of thinking is, my mind was like, man, how can we actually create a situation where that person's not living like that?
Exactly.
So this is, as different individuals,
it helps
we have to
solve their problem.
Right. So you're analyzing it one way, I was analyzing it another way, but the bottom line is, we can become problem solvers and we can fix all these situations, instead of judging and condemning and say, oh, I would never. It's like, I'm like, man, so what can we do to fix that? And you're like, well, what would it take to bring a person to live? And when you get minds like that, then you start actually coming up with real solutions to creating a better environment.
All of those is stay out of his
But
way.
you need a lot of people to do that, because like I don't think like that. I didn't think like that. But when you present it, I'm like, that's actually a pretty great way of thinking, like because again, you have to be aware of yourself and what, so that you don't make poor decisions or allow yourself to get to a point where you don't even care about your health or your surroundings or anything like that. And if you get to that point, then how are you going to be a benefit to someone else?
Right.
So you just used empathy to sympathize, which is a really rare talent, you know, and that just comes from the analytical idea of the mind, the analytical aspect of the mind, which kind of almost is like a calling card back to the beginning of this, where we're talking about, you know, if you're discouraging these kind of thinking in your children from the start, you're not developing these kind of people. And so, you know, you can develop unsympathetic people, and these can result into, you know, I'm saying I don't want to just like straight to like things like racism, but that's kind of the situation. Is like there's already the separation, and the people who already, you know, they have this oh, you look different, whatever, they're also not able to empathize with that person's experience as a human.
Right, exactly.
As a human being. They're not able to sympathize with them because they're not, and it's because it's not analytical thought, it's not logical thought, it's not looking at them. And so that, you know, those kind of things can come from simple, it's, you know, as we're talking about the importance of parenting, come from simple things that we take for granted.
Remember earlier, I think it was you that was hitting on the fact that it might have been you. Everything is easy these days, you know. Everything is easy. It's fast paced, blah, 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 blah. Racism is easy.
Right.
You don't have to put forth any effort in trying to get along with another person.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of the easiest things to do, you know, and it's definitely easy to get to spark a dialogue on, you know, and to cause problems, you know. Well, this person didn't get the job because he was black, or this person didn't get the job because he was white. You know, they needed more black people, and this and that is like, this guy wasn't qualified and he was, or vice versa. It's like he got the job because he's qualified. It has nothing. It shouldn't have anything to do with skin color or anything. But again, it's easy. It's easy to cause problems. It's easy.
That brings us right back to what we were talking about us thinking that we're owed something, us not appreciating our own position in societies, because the only reason you weren't able to get the job is because you didn't fit, like you said, you weren't qualified. The only reason you weren't qualified is because you cut yourself short.
That should be the case.
Right.
That should be the case.
Because there are cases
because racism is real.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it is real.
It is real.
And again, if you don't get the job, it should be based on the fact that you're not qualified for the job, you know, not because of affirmative action or whatever. Matter of fact, I think I just heard on the radio the other day, I think it was yesterday, and I can't remember where this is going on at, but I think it's in Ohio, as a matter of fact. One of the politicians up there,
So of course it was Ohio.
Yeah, well, that's why I thought it was interesting. I'm like, well, I'm from Ohio, you know. And so and I can't remember who the person was, but he was saying, you know, we need to create jobs in the community to where you can look and say, hey, they look like me, instead of, you know, other people coming in and taking the jobs, and then this community can't build and be, you know, self-sufficient. And I was like, okay, I see the point, but at the same time, you've already set up, you know, a barrier. And it's a lot of people that will argue that, like, well, you know, the people in our own community don't have jobs. But it's like, okay, then it's one thing to create jobs in the community, but then to like create them, you know, on the platform that it's only for you and no one else. Right. You know, it's vocalizing that there is a barrier instead of just creating the jobs. You want to broadcast that, no, we're actually going to be discriminating. That's a problem for me. Just create the jobs, and if they're local jobs, then how are people that's not local going to hear about them? Right. So, you know, it's a way of creating local jobs, but
that already sort of falls in because of racism.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're looking at the people. Because even in the way he's looking at these people is like the difference between the races. Because you know, I think there's a difference between family and race. The issue is you're almost equating race to the equal of family. Whereas, like, you know, if you have a son, you're more responsible for your son than this person's son. And so like, maybe, you know, you're in a situation where you have someone you could have somebody work in your business. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna give my son a job, you know, and it's like not necessarily wrong that you didn't give him a job. But race is like, we're looking at the end and go, oh well, you know, it's almost the same. It's like, but you know, we understand that there's really only one race, right? There's these different nationalities and colors, it's one race, but you're already here looking. The way he's looking at already himself is that's thus us and them. It's our family, our race, and it's theirs, and so therefore it can't be wrong with, you know, working with the people in your same race. Well, it's not the same. It's not the same sort of thing there. So you're already setting in your own mind. You already have this massive divide. Right, of being like, you know, we need to deal with our people's problems. and these people can't understand because they're those people. It goes back to tribalism, which is where this all kind of sort of started. Because if you look at the American Indians, you know, they were similar color and they were enslaving each other and they were killing each other because they had their different tribes. And so it's like it all goes back to that, which is a kind of a fundamental issue we have, which is the, you know, we recognize the difference. This is kind of how we are as humans. We notice differences, specifically visually, because we're visual creatures. And, you know, it's hard. I find it's hard for humanity as a whole to strive, to work, to grow. I don't know if I'm going to put this right. Without someone to hate. Not saying it's
that stuff is taught. It's taught.
It's not saying that it's fundamental, but like that's a situation. It's taught, but it's like not saying it's a fundamental. Humans have to have someone to hate. But the point of like you look throughout like history, they always like find someone to hate to unify.
Right.
And that's in this sort of pattern. It's taught, but it's a pattern that's been taught so long. It's natural almost. It's integrated into humanity, into DNA, where it's like so long it's been taught. It's not the original way we're made, but it's where we're natural. Like to just be like, okay, well, you know, we need to get together. So what can we get together against?
It's like wars. There's been wars for so long in history.
You know, when I found out I was black. Yes, I'm black.
Wow.
You know, when I found out I was in the 4th grade, right? The teacher did attendance, and she asked for all of the black students to raise their hands, right? And so I saw all the children, you know, that was darker than me raising their hands, and I'm like, and then when she asked for the white children, and I saw all of the white children raise their hand, I'm like, well. And I went home and I told my mom. My mom was so upset. She was like, why is she teaching y'all that? Not upset because I raised my hand as a white kid. But she was upset that the teacher was actually separating the children that, you know, and she went up to the school and that's the end of my story.
That's the end of the story.
That's the end of my story.
No more questions need to be asked.
Yeah, because she didn't want to teach us that. She didn't want us to like grow up, you know, with like hatred towards, you know, other people with different skin colors. She just didn't raise us like that, you know.
Correct me if I'm wrong or getting off track here, but I think that segregation aspect is much harder to do in a society where everybody is self-sufficient. You know, right now, if you want something done, there's a certain specialist for what you need to get done, right? And if it's something outside of what that guy specializes in, you're not going to get it done unless you find a specialist for that. You know, so people aren't. They don't value themselves in the aspect of, oh, I can fix that. You know, it's not, people have to wait on the side of the road for the tire to come. You know, you can't change your tire, or you want your door done, you need somebody to come do your door. Right? There's these certain specifications. So people don't really value themselves. Like, oh, well, I don't know how to do it. So, right? And then it's like, wait, you don't know how to do that? Like, do you have qualification in that? You know, it seems like in a society where everybody can handle their own situation, everybody can fix their own problems, it's hard to segregate. It's hard to you know, penalize a certain group of people and be like, yo, you guys are like at the bottom, you know, because everybody's capable of the same things.
That's why education is really important.
I absolutely lost it. I had it, and then as soon as you cut me off.
Sorry.
Yeah, nice. Here, talks over. You're just talking over me. You cut me off. Oh, yes. Okay. So it's virtually impossible for a person to be completely self-sufficient.
Guaranteed.
Virtually impossible. I think that would be no. It's virtually impossible. I disagree. As humans, we need humans, and it's like give me an example of someone who, you know, I'm not saying okay. No, yeah. No, this is the importance of community. This is almost go back to what we're talking about, like parenting. Everything comes with it. There's no one. You came from somebody. You're already not. You didn't create yourself. So by a definition of like you didn't, you know, obviously, you know, you could argue if that fits as self-sufficient. But name one, like specifically now, a person. You could pick a person who says, you know, he knows how to fix his plumbing. He knows how to build his house. He knows how to fix his car. Who made his tools? Who taught him how to build his house? Who taught him how to fix it? Did he just...
Is this the same subject, though?
This is what I'm talking about. So I think... Because I agree, but at the same time, you're talking about, like, okay, if you look at examples of, like, labor forces, right? right? Because I think that takes away the trickery of people who choose to segregate people.
Right.
So if you're talking about someone choosing to segregate versus people choosing to segregate each other, I think it takes away the trickery of people who choose to segregate people, because you have all these things about classes and all these things. Like if you take it and look at it, like, okay, the people with lower classes have more skill, right? In real living, right? It's like the guys who over here who can fix a car versus the guy who has the car, the Rolls Royce. Like, okay, yeah, but if that guy just refuses to fix his car and everyone in the world refuses to fix his car, how's he going to get his car fixed? He's not, right? But they're tricky enough to find a way to keep you down there.
This subject is like
Opening.
it goes into a lot of different directions.
There's a lot because the world is
And that's the thing. Again, I could bring it back down to one word though. That I think it was you that brought it up earlier. Respect. Respect. I mean, if everyone had a respect for everyone's life and their, and their right to enjoy a life and things like that, it would be a better place.
Absolutely.
The person with, like you said, if he had like $1 million, if he didn't know how to build a house, here's a guy with the skills that know how to build a house. He's going to live in a home while this rich person has no place to stay. But if he valued this person's life, the person that could build a house, hey, I'll build your house so that you have a place to stay because it's raining, it's cold. This time of year, you'll freeze to death, right? Mm-hmm. And this person should say, well, hey, I'll pay you for your labor, right? Boom. Now you have something going right there, But if neither one of them cares about each other, this person might live because he has a house, and here's this other person that might die. What kind of a community are we building if there's that type of separation? So it goes back, and it's more complicated, but if you don't have respect, you're not going to have anything really.
Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think but maybe another way, this is maybe what you were saying, this is the way I think you might have been saying, is self-sufficient people are harder to oppress. Because I think there's a difference. Because I think that people in a lot of ways naturally segregate themselves, as we said, because it's become natural. People in a lot of ways will go like, don't go over there. You know what I'm saying? But the idea of oppressing a person who needs the system less than someone who fully needs the system is more difficult to oppress.
Well, okay, it seems like segregation stems from some one person's belief of, I can do this better than you can. I know how to do this. You don't. It's something that
Are we talking about, okay.
That's what I'm saying. Again, we have to
I'm talking about race. When we talk about segregation, you're generally talking about racial segregation.
Well, okay, no, that's not what I'm. That's not what I'm.
Then you should use a different word, because segregation generally is because of civil rights.
Well, hey,
is inherently tied.
Listen. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
That's all. Like,
not the way it's supposed to be.
What subject are we on?
Yeah.
Because again, it has all of these things can go into like a lot of different directions. Right. Period.
Right. We should nail it down. Here's a subject. Put a nail in it.
It's hard to put into one word.
I'd like to get back to parental transparency myself.
I want to, because he brought parental transparency up.
I think it's a great.
What was interesting, he brought it up, and I go like parental transparency, and then what really was is instead of you had a point you wanted to make about parents.
Yeah, and you
probably your own dad. So I was like parental transparency, and then you went off. I can't remember what the other, but you were like because of like whatever, and it was about like telling your children they can do anything and whatever. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't define what parental transparency is. Right, because we're talking about like what is parental transparency, and you're just like, well, parental transparency is like parents shouldn't, if they're telling their children they can do anything, they just I was like, that's not. So you were like bringing a point out of it. That's why we brought that back. But what do you want to know about parental transparency?
I don't
know. Parents become transparent.
Because you and I were talking for a moment during the break.
Yeah,
and I can't remember exactly what you said, but you thought of something.
We started going in a certain direction, and then we quickly switched off of it when we were talking about the whole topic of parental transparency. There's something that specifically like a father will instill in his children, the value for hard work and the value for hard work and, drive and motivation to get things done. And, yes. But something that I feel like you have, I've noticed you have, and I've noticed you instill in your kids is, let me turn it into a question. Better phrase it. How can a parent instill in his children not just the value for hard work, but also the drive and motivation and the willpower to get it done and to not stop, to just, blow through the obstacles? We were talking about people who, might go for a job opportunity and get turned down, and that might shut them down. But A person who has drive and motivation will go for the next job opportunity, go to the next job interview, do this, update their resume, update their cover letter, do all the things because they have that drive and motivation to not stop. How can you instill that in your children? And B, how can one who doesn't have that instill it in themselves?
Okay. Well,
Multifaceted.
I would say one of the things that you have to do, again, you have to be engaged in your children's life. Communication is like in every aspect. But as far as trying to instill in them the desire and things like that, it's hands-on. There's going to be success and failure. Let's say something like gardening. Not everything is going to grow. And then you have to, explain to them why it didn't grow and then try again. It's like trial and error, just like in science, you just continue to repeat things over and over again until there's success. And then you log down, well, why did it fail? What were the possibilities of failure? What can you do to improve? These things, you have to appreciate setbacks and failures, and you have to understand that, look, if you're going to be successful, then you have to know that there's going to be a certain amount of failure. You have to know that. A lot. It's you're going to fail more times than you're going to succeed, but you have to appreciate both because, again, it builds character. And this is what you were saying earlier. These things build character. So,
you say that again. You're going to fail more than you succeed.
You're going to fail more than you succeed. That's the reality of it.
If you don't fail, you're not really trying.
That was the transparency aspect that I was bringing up. The failing part. Nobody ever talks about the failures.
Yeah, but failing, isn't a bad thing.
No,
exactly.
It's not a bad thing. If you and again, it's subject to identifying, specifics.
Really, failure is a great thing because Thomas Edison, before he made the light bulb, had so many failures, but he knocked that, and he knows that doesn't work now, and he moves on to the next thing, and he knows that doesn't work now. Each of those failures was a lesson that he can keep learning based on how you look at it. If you look at it like, man, I failed, I might as well stop trying. I must suck. Well, you're never going to find that.
Then
success.
You're not going to be successful.
Right.
So it's like with anything. Let's say sports, for instance. You want to be the quarterback. I know when we were growing up, we had like the tire drills where you had to throw the ball through the tire. Look, you throw the ball. You have 100 attempts. You're not gonna throw it through the tire 100 times. You're probably gonna get 30 out of 100. If you feel that's failure, then you might as well just give up. You go back the next day and it's like, what did I do to get that 30? You start paying attention to like, arm movement, like the way that you turn your body to throw the ball, whatever. And then you start to focus on the things that you do right and then eliminate the steps that are wrong. You might have been opening up your foot too wide. So you start fine tuning those things till you become more successful. Now, the next day you might have maybe 32 out of the 100 and you just watch the progress, right? But, if you're not looking at it to be productive and you just think that you're, like you said, well, I suck and you give up, then that's true failure right there. When you give up. But as long as you're trying and you're doing better, you'll get better at it. It's a word called practice, right? Practice makes perfect. I'm sure everyone heard that saying before. If not, then somebody need to say it, to you. But practice makes perfect. You have to continue to try. But that's the thing. You have to be engaged in your children's lives. And even if it's not a child, even if it's like a coworker, you have to be an example as well. Positive encouragement. I think most people know these things. They're just not practiced. And sometimes we do need to hear these things again. It's like, what? My mom taught me that. My grandparents taught me that. I know better. But again, they have to be practiced. You have to do it.
Right. And I think the key with all of that is the idea of introducing, working, struggling for things. Because it's consistently, so it's like with all this failure, it's consistently, the reason why it's not permanent failure is because you're still struggling and trying to accomplish it instead of just giving up. And I think that's where you start. We start with introducing the idea to your children of working for things and struggling things and understanding, like, yes, failure is also part of the discomfort. It's like, listen, it's never going to come immediately. It's always usually going to be uncomfortable. And, you got to keep going. So then when they fail, right, that's kind of helping to build that motivation. Because I think that if you expect something to be a certain way and it doesn't that way, that's one of the quickest ways to lose motivation.
Yeah.
Right. If you're like, I'm just going to go pick this thing up and then you can't, you're like, you know what I mean? If your mind's not set right, but if your mind's set properly, if you're instilling the children, they're going, okay, well, now I need to work so I can do that. It's like, but if you just teach them, everything's just going to come with minimal effort, and you don't teach them to understand and embrace, I don't want to say not just embrace, but like accept the fact of just working and discomfort in life, then as soon as they get their first failure, it's going to be like, well, this was not for me. I'm not cut out to do this.
Yeah. Like I think if I'm not mistaken, Abraham Lincoln failed, a few things in his life. I think he, how many times did he run for president to be the president? Like 2 or 3 times or something. I think he won it like the second time or the third time. I think and I might be wrong on my history. It's been a long time, but I do remember that I think he failed the law exam. I think he failed the bar once or twice or something like that. But he was determined, to be a lawyer, to be the president. He didn't look at those setbacks as failure, even though some people would like, look at this guy. He's running for president again. He's trying to do this again. It's like he was determined to get it done. So he wasn't a failure in his own eyes. But as other people, like you mentioned earlier, people have come in and it's like, oh, well, I would never take the law exam 3 times if I failed. Oh, I would never run for president after embarrassing myself and losing in front of the whole nation. Oh, I would never. Yeah, then you're going to fail. I mean, that's really what failure is. But, it's an example of what failure is. I don't speak in absolutes. So, again, it's up to each individual, and it's really a difficult thing to build desire in another person. You can lead a horse to water, right? You can do that all day long, but it's going to be up to that individual. You can prep them, provide all of the tools that's necessary, whether it's, physical, emotional, whatever they need to, to actually pursue something. But it's going to be up to that individual to make the choice though. And that's the most difficult thing as being a parent. You'll do your best to try to equip your children with all the information that they need to be successful in life. But all it'll take is like, this neighbor over here to be a negative influence, or this person here, or for them to be with the wrong group of people at this particular time that can change their life or end their life or whatever. So it's life is like, life is real. Like you said, I mean, it's real. And so, there's going to be all kinds of frustrations and things like that. But, to get a person, to do certain things, it's almost impossible. You can set the stage, but they're going to have to choose.
So I want to get y'all's take on this. I listened to an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was talking about, I didn't hear enough of it to know whether he was talking about your beliefs in general or whether you're striving for a certain goal. But he said, once you develop a plan B, you've already lost. I want to get your take on that because I can understand where he's coming from. In your mind, if there's always going to be a plan B, you're not going to put, all your effort into plan A, right? Because you're like, well, I have a plan B. I just want to get y'all's.
I think it depends on what the plan B is for. So like if it's finances, one of the huge thing is like diversify, not just having everything right here. This is plan A. No, you want to spread that out. Now, if you're looking at a relationship, like let's say, like you're getting married, if you have a plan B, then you're already saying, well, this might not work.
So you already cannot put in the same effort.
So, I don't have to go all out because there's other women out there. So yeah, you're not going to really devote all of your energy into that relationship. So again, it just depends on what it is. So, and with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's like, he's all about, if you think you can go into another gym, man, I don't know. We're not talking about 2 different gyms in this guy, no. But I do get it. But again, if you're speaking in absolutes, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So you have to identify the specifics, because some things you have to have a plan B. You have to. If you don't have a plan B, and then if this doesn't work, then you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
You're done.
In a lot of things, it's wise to have a plan B, but there's a difference between accepting like a plan B, the idea of a plan B. So like, because it is great in a lot of things the issue with the point which he's making is that people are too quick to settle for plan B.
Right.
People set up plan B
because they're not going to. Well,
people set up plan B.
Again, you got to identify when you need a plan B and when you need to be all in this situation here.
Well, it's like people set up plan B because they've already decided plan A is not going to work.
Well,
That's
a lot of
generally what occurs. People are setting up plan B because they go, I already know this is not going to work. I'll go ahead and give it a try, but I have this because I know that's not going to work. They're already giving up on it.
Well, it's a lot of success stories come out of desperation because there was no plan B, you know, and I think that's a lot of the point that he's trying to make, because like people end up having to do something because they're screwed. You know, either people have died in their life or they're, you know, just got diagnosed with a horrible illness or something like that. And you see these amazing success stories come out of these situations because of the desperation, because they had no other way out. They had to make this work. And since they were one-track minded, it worked very well. And I think that's what Arnold is saying, is almost recreate that for yourself, where there is no other option. I have to get this goal accomplished. Leave yourself no way out is what he's trying to say. You know, but like you're saying, it is important to have backups when you can and where necessary.
So I agree. I agree with what you said about it depends on your situation. But I also see that there are certain situations where you have no choice but to make plan A work, right? And I think it's a massive skill knowing when those situations arise and when you have to concede. You know, people will burn themselves out because plan A was a failure. Plan A is never going to work. You're like, oh, I got to make it work.
Right. You have to know when to stop.
You have to know when to stop. And I think that also ties back in with what we were saying, knowing yourself, knowing your limits, knowing how far you can push. Also, I tend not to, a little bit off topic, but I tend not to like the expression of everybody's not like you. You know, like everybody, like, you know, these people transform their lives. A guy who was 300 pounds lost, you know, 200 pounds in 4 months.
I thought about checking out a guy that weighed 300 pounds, lost 300 pounds. Well, he didn't make it.
He lost, he lost these many pounds in like 4 months. And people will say, well, you're not him. You know, you can't, not everybody's the same.
But that
That's
can't
a
be
true statement, though.
It can be true. It can be true.
And
Right?
sometimes you don't need to.
Because different people have different motivations,
right.
you know?
You know what I'm saying? It's like sometimes you don't need to be. If you're listen, it's like you see these guys like David Goggins who run on broken feet, right? And this is the person who they are, and this is who they choose to be. Sometimes you don't need to be him to succeed in your life, right? Like there's extremes, right? I understand that at the same time, though, it's like, yeah, some people do use that as an excuse not to even try, not to even put that sort of level. But it is such a true statement because so much in society already, specifically with, you know, social media and ever, we compare ourselves to other people so much. And then we consider ourselves a failure or a success based on the amount of their failure and their success. And that doesn't work because you're not them and they're not you. So it's like, listen, you know, even just if you just even take it physically, like, you know, you're never going to be in the NBA, right? You're not, but it's like, well, you can go, well, both of you, but you could go like, well, but like LeBron James is the NBA, and so if I don't succeed, if I don't get in, if I don't do what he does, and I'm not like him, if I don't put so you know what? Oh, well, this is what he does. Like, okay, well, yeah, but you know, you're still gonna be, you know, the shortest player is like what, 6'3". So you're still gonna be like their shortest their mascot maybe. So it's like some things. It's just like, you know, we already compare ourselves so much in society, and that's another thing that kills people's motivations. Because then they begin to go, well, I'm never gonna be like that. And the point is that. You don't have to be like that.
Yeah, you have to tailor your thing for your life.
Take out the characteristics that you're talking about. This is about the idea of role models that you admire. You know, it's important about role models, you know, because a lot of times, you know, people take role models too far like that. Then when they'll do things that will end up like making them lose respect for them because they set them up on this pedestal. The idea is like, you know, to take out the qualities, the positive qualities of a person, and then, you know, not adopt the rest, right? Not just become a carbon coffee is our sponsor. Carbon copy of that person, and just be like, well, you know, and then when they do a thing where you go like, wow, I can't believe you did that. Now it's like disillusioned with this person, which I personally experienced so I was, after I experienced it, I'm looking back going, okay, you know, really, you're not supposed to expect everyone to be perfect, right? But sometimes you do, because, you know, when someone, you know, you set someone up as a role model, and then you do expect them to just, and then when they make mistakes, it's just like, how could you do that? And then it's like, why did I even like want to be like you, or these what positive things? And then suddenly it can become quickly just like that person's horrible. Like he's just he's awful. There's nothing there. But I think that comes too much from that sort of with social media, everything's just in your face and this is this person's life.
Yeah, I'm not a social media fan. I'm not a fan of social media.
You saying you don't follow?
Yeah, I'm just saying, when you're dealing
You don't
with
subscribe to social media, is that what you're saying?
I don't. When you're dealing with children and things like that, and then all you do is put all of these thoughts and other experiences in their mind, and they don't even know who they are. Right. How do you expect them to really function? It's like here's an 8-year-old, 9-year-old don't know who they are. Parents not really dealing with them, and now they just have this wide range of information from all of these multiple aspects of people who think they're cats and dogs and kangaroos and polar bears and what do you expect this child to do? So I'm not a fan of social media, because there's not enough teaching behind it to where it can be processed properly. And the problem is that children don't know how to process. Adults don't even know how to process information. When you have a doctor telling this person it's okay to be a cat, you think he's processing information properly? No, I'm not a fan of social media. It could be an effective tool, used properly, but, who's governing what's allowed to be on there? It's crazy. I just
people with money.
Yeah, I just don't. I think it's part of the decline of society.
And to be fair, though, I think at this point in society, whether it's declined or improved or however you want to look at it, because someone could say, well, it's improved. We have all these access to different things. It's definitely declined in a lot of ways too. It's the way society is evolving. It's literally simply just a part of society at this point. And we got to learn how to raise our children in a way where they know how to face it and they know how to face it well and efficiently and properly, because it's simply a fact. And because I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying someone who comes with the mindset, I don't like social media, I'm just going to act like it doesn't exist or ban all my children from it or whatever, is unrealistic.
It is unrealistic.
It's very unrealistic. So the better way would be to train them how to deal with the problem.
And that's the point, the information's out here, but there's no guidance so that the children can function properly. Yeah. There's no filters that, and the, parents just sit their children, or a lot of children, be in their rooms with their own little phones and their own TVs, just soaking in all of this information, and they're not guiding them on what they're seeing. They don't know how to process what they're seeing.
Now more than ever, it's more important. It's extremely important to train people on how to deal with influences properly.
Exactly.
And how to understand and become their own person.
My son told me the other day, he said, and I don't know what platform this was on, but he said it was a guy, he was talking to a young lady, and I guess they were talking about dating or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then she put him in a friend zone. And so he sued her for like $27,000.
Wow.
Exactly. And I was like, wow. Immediately I said, you know what, man, if that wouldn't have occurred in my day, there's no way I could show up in the hood like, man, I just sued this girl because she just said we're friends. It's like, what? I'm like, I just can't even fathom that type of a mindset. It's like, really? You're suing girls because they say you're just a friend. It's like, you shouldn't even be friends. But that's a different conversation. But I'm just a matter of fact, someone else told me, and I don't know how true this is. He said, in the military, and I don't know which branch, or again, even if it's true, but I thought it was interesting. You know how like drill sergeants are depicted, up in your face, maggot, you do 30 push-ups, blah, 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 blah. He was like, now, all they got to do is hold up some kind of a card or something, and then they have to back off because it's like, you're stressing me out emotionally.
They don't use certain ma'am in the Marine Corps anymore.
Huh?
They don't use certain ma'am in the Marine Corps anymore.
Really? You see everything, I'm just saying this is just
the decline of society.
We're just softer. We're just, it's different. It's just, everything is just different. The values are different. Everything is, I don't know. I'm not that old, but it's definitely a different world than when I was a teenager.
It's changed very quickly, definitely. And that's because things like, social media are so massively different, and, phones and all those things are so massively different from anything we've had throughout human history. But I think that we are softer because if we don't get that under control, we're going to be put in a position to make us not so stronger again. Right. Because that's what occurs. Like if you don't, I almost want to say, I don't want to say this way where people might say it spiritually, like, oh, but if you don't learn certain traits that people would have said in the past, like if you don't learn something, you're going to call that test upon you, that trial upon you. And it's like, if you don't get those skills, then you're going to develop that. So it's like, if we don't, find our way past it and certain these things, we're going to create a world that is horrible, and we're going to all be forced to become stronger people. In a way,
I think society has a strong tendency to overcorrect for everything because, without the right guidance, society tends to overcorrect. And I think that's a great example of what this is, how, it's in a lot of ways it started with, we need to have concern for other people's feelings. We need to be more inclusive. We need to do all these things. But then we've steered so far in the wrong, what might have started in the right direction, but now it's steered so far in one direction that it's become a problem. Right. Where now, like you said, people are like, oh, I feel like a cat. Well, we better treat him as a cat and all this other stuff. It's like, no, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
So we're overcorrecting in one, and then we could easily overcorrect in the other direction and become a bunch of freaking brutes, and not have any care for anybody's feelings at the same time. So it's really.
So when I say softer, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to say it in a bad way, but like the various examples that y'all gave.
No, but it can be in a bad way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I just want to make sure that we're identifying what soft means.
Absolutely.
And again, it like you just said, it's kind of like accepting the fact that this person think that they're a cat, and then it's okay. It's not okay. Yeah. How is that okay? I mean. With like the participation certificates and things like that. Oh, well, at least you showed up to play. Here's a certificate. Okay, you just lost by 100 points, but you're going to get like a trophy.
And you can see where that might have been all with great intentions. The person was like, well, I don't like seeing them sad, but you're actually hurting them more.
Right. Because tell me how many times have you not gone to work but got participation money? Nope. I've never seen a participation check. So it's not real life,
Yeah.
It's not real life. I mean, how many people would be milking that situation? Hey, let me get my participation check. Well, you didn't participate. I still want my check though. So it's a ridiculous concept. I mean, again, when let's say the child, the children lost the game or whatever, that's where coaches and parents need to be encouraging. Like, well, you can do better. They worked hard, but you can, work hard and do better. It's right. It's to me, it just seems like it's an easy thing, but these are things that aren't really taught these days, and that's where it boils down to teaching and actually being a part of your children's life and being a family. When I was growing up, my grandmother couldn't put her children out of the house. She was like, y'all grown, y'all need to go get your house. But I remember aunts and uncles living there. We had dinner at a certain time, and my grandfather would go to bed and he went to work, like 4 o'clock the next day. He'd be up at like 2:30, 3 o'clock getting ready for work, and, that's what I was used to seeing when I was growing up. Grandma, she didn't have a job. She just, made sure that the house was taken care of and she cooked. That was their relationship. And, she raised us. So, but now it's like the family unit is really being destroyed. I mean, if you don't know the difference between a man and a woman, I think we have an issue in society. It's like, well, what is a woman?
I can't tell you that.
Really, right? It's like you don't even understand what gender is. Why? Because this is what I'm talking about, like soft. It's like we can't even identify a man and a woman. A man cannot have children. He cannot carry a child. And if he does, that means he's a woman. It's like, oh, you must have thought you were a guy, but you really wasn't, because men aren't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
I think the same way that society is going in a horrible direction right now, the same way that people's belief systems are getting completely jacked up. There's a group of people, group of young men, group of young women, all across the board who see that. And I think it's resting on their shoulders to take things back. And I think it's going to occur, because there's only so much you can put up with. People who are saying, well, you can't change your reality and make it everybody else's. You can't, you don't deserve all these things. You don't get something unless you've worked for it. And I think that's what's going to turn. I think those who believe that, those who really preach that, are going to turn most of society. So we're definitely not hopeless. We're definitely not.
I would definitely agree. I would definitely agree. And I think that it kind of goes back to what you were saying. And I think all that is because of the symptomatic way we deal with things. But, that's exactly what the deal is. That's kind of what this is about here, is that, we're symptomatic, so we might treat this thing and go overboard, but that's why you have to have different perspectives different generations.
Yep.
To kind of go, okay, if you go overboard there, though, this is what that's going to turn into. And so we're able to look at it from all perspectives, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We're going to have to call that for this one. But it's been fun, and
I wasn't done talking.
well, you can keep talking, but all of this is going away. So we'll have to shut it down, and thanks for being on, guys.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right.
Listen, guys, we're doing great things here at the Lamplight Productions, and you can be a part of it for the low price of $0.00, because all you gotta do is subscribe, ring the bell, ding dong, you can't go wrong, or don't. It's a free country, do whatever you want. So I don't know how you can live with yourself.